Welcome back to HFY Soundscape, the best channel for HFY sci-fi tales.
They say the vacuum of space is silent, but for Captain Kaelen Vance, the silence was deafening. It wasn't the void outside the hull of the stellar envoy that unnerved him. It was the weight of the crown he was about to face. Kaelen adjusted the high, stiff collar of his United Earth Federation dress uniform. The fabric was a composite of smart fibers designed to regulate temperature, yet he felt like he was suffocating in a furnace of his own anxiety. This wasn't just a diplomatic meeting. This was the first time a human had ever stepped foot on the crystalline surface of Lyra Prime, the ancestral seat of the Valerians. One wrong move, one misplaced word, and the fragile peace between their species would shatter like the very glass towers waiting for them below. "You're twitching, Captain." A cool, synthesized voice rang in his ear. "I'm not twitching, Mira. I'm recalibrating my posture," Kaelen countered, though his fingers continued to fumble with a silver medal on his chest. Mira was the ship's advanced tactical AI, but over the 6-month journey, she had developed a personality that bordered on relentlessly observant. "Data suggests a 98% probability that you are terrified," Mira replied. "Would you like me to activate the cabin's sedative mist?" "No sedatives. I need to be sharp." Kaelen took a deep breath, staring at his reflection in the viewport. He didn't look like a war hero today. He looked like a man being sent to a velvet-lined execution. The Valerians weren't just technologically superior. They were biologically haunting. They were a race of beings that perceived time and emotion through light and frequency. To them, humans were loud, chaotic, and dangerously short-lived. "Hold on before we get into the real stuff. I want to know. What are you doing at this exact moment while hearing my voice? I love seeing your answers down below in the comments." The stellar envoy groaned as the docking maglocks engaged with the orbital spire. A low, harmonic hum vibrated through the floorboards, a sound that felt more like a song than a mechanical process. This was it. The airlock hissed, releasing a plume of pressurized vapor that smelled faintly of ozone and crushed jasmine. Kaelen stepped forward, his boots clicking against the translucent walkway. As the doors slid open, the light blinded him. It wasn't the harsh glare of a sun, but a shimmering, iridescent glow emanating from the walls themselves. Standing at the end of the hall was a contingent of Valerian guards, their armor carved from obsidian that seemed to swallow the light. But it wasn't the guards that stopped Kaelen's heart. It was the figure standing between them. Princess Elara. She stood nearly 7 feet tall, her skin a pale, shimmering indigo that caught the light like the surface of a deep ocean. Her eyes weren't eyes at all, but swirling nebulae of gold and violet. When she looked at Kaelen, he felt a physical jolt, like an electric current passing through his marrow. The rumors hadn't done her justice. She didn't just look like royalty. She looked like a force of nature draped in silks made of woven starlight. Kaelen remembered his training. Bow at 45 degrees. Do not maintain eye contact for more than 3 seconds. Wait for the rhythmic chime before speaking. He did none of it. He was paralyzed. He was a representative of Earth's toughest survivors, a man who had stared down rogue asteroids and pirate fleets. Yet here he was, unable to breathe because a woman from another star system looked at him. Elara stepped forward, her movement fluid and silent. She stopped inches from him. The air around her was cold, yet Kaelen felt a heat rising in his chest. She tilted her head, her nebula eyes scanning his face with a curiosity that felt almost invasive. "Captain Kaelen Vance of Earth," she said. Her voice didn't come from her throat. It echoed directly inside his mind, a melodic resonance that made his skin tingle. "You bring the scent of iron and ancient dust. Why does your heart beat with such violence?" Kaelen opened his mouth to give the scripted diplomatic response, the one about shared prosperity and interstellar cooperation. But as he looked into those swirling violet depths, the words died in his throat. He realized in that moment that he wasn't just there to sign a treaty. He was there for something far more dangerous. The princess reached out, her long, slender fingers hovering just an inch from his cheek. She didn't touch him, but he could feel the static charge between them. "Your species is fragile," she whispered into his thoughts. "And yet, you carry a fire that threatens to burn my world. Tell me, Captain, are you here to negotiate, or are you here to conquer?" Kaelen felt the guards shift, their obsidian spears humming with lethal energy. One wrong answer would end the human embassy before it even began. Kaelen felt the cold sweat prickling at the back of his neck. The obsidian spears of the Valerian guards glowed with a rhythmic, pulsating violet light, a clear sign they were primed to discharge. In the silence of the docking bay, the only sound was the frantic drumming of his own heart, a sound Elara seemed to be studying with clinical intensity. She wasn't just looking at him. She was reading the bioelectrical frequency of his fear. "I am here," Kaelen began, his voice rasping slightly before he found his command tone, "to ensure that neither of our worlds has to burn, Princess. Humans are many things, but we are rarely predictable. We don't come to conquer. We come to endure." Elara's nebulae eyes swirled with a sudden flash of gold amusement, or perhaps skepticism. She withdrew her hand, the static charge lingering on Kaelen's skin like a phantom touch. "Endurance," she mused, the word echoing in Kaelen's mind like a distant bell, a passive trait for such a restless species. "Come, Captain Vance. The High Council of Lyra does not like to be kept waiting, and my father's patience is as thin as the atmosphere of your moon." She turned with a fluid, predatory grace, her starlight silks trailing behind her like a comet's tail. Kaelen fell into step behind her, Myra's voice whispering urgently in his ear. "Captain, bioscans indicate the princess's internal temperature is dropping. In Valerian physiology, that's an indication of intense curiosity. You're doing something right, though I'm not sure what. Try not to trip on your own feet." "Not helping, Mira," Kaelen muttered under his breath. They moved through a corridor carved entirely from living silicate. It pulsed with a soft amber light that responded to Elara's presence, brightening as she passed. Kaelen looked out the massive crystalline viewports. Below them, the capital city of Elara stretched out, a sprawling metropolis of floating spires and suspended gardens, all interconnected by bridges of pure energy. It was a masterpiece of harmony, a world that had never known the industrial scars of Earth. "It's beautiful," Kaelen said, breaking the diplomatic silence. Elara didn't look back, but the amber light in the walls shifted to a deeper, warmer hue. "It is perfect," she corrected. "Every stone, every frequency is tuned to the great song of Lyra. There is no discord here, no noise, unlike the broadcast signals we receive from your sector. Your world screams, Captain. It screams of hunger, of war, and of something you call longing. It is very distracting. That noise is just us trying to find our way." Kaelen replied, his defensive instinct flaring. "We don't have the luxury of a great song. We have to write our own music as we go, and sometimes, it gets a little loud." Elara stopped abruptly at a massive set of silver doors. She turned to face him, her expression unreadable. "My father believes your music is a virus. He believes that if we let humanity into our borders, your chaos will unravel our symphony. He intends to vote for the immediate quarantine of the Sol system. A total blockade. You have 1 hour to change his mind." Kaelen felt a weight drop in his stomach. A blockade meant the end of Earth's expansion, the slow starvation of the colonies, and eventually, a war they couldn't win. The pressure was no longer just about a beautiful princess. It was about the survival of 8 billion souls. "And you?" Kaelen asked, stepping closer than protocol allowed. "What do you believe, Elara?" For the first time, the princess's composed facade flickered. Her indigo skin shimmered with a pale lavender light, the Valerian equivalent of a blush. She looked at his hand, then back to his eyes. "I believe," she whispered into his mind, "that I have never met a creature that carries its own sun inside its chest. Your heat is unusual." The silver doors began to groan open, revealing a chamber filled with hundreds of Valerian elders, their eyes all fixed on the solitary human in the doorway. The air was thick with the scent of ancient ozone. "1 hour, Captain," Elara whispered, her voice tinged with a sudden sharp edge of desperation. "Make them feel your son, or we will never speak again." As Kaelen stepped into the lion's den, Mira's voice crackled. "Captain, I'm detecting a massive energy surge from the planet's surface. Someone isn't waiting for the Council's vote. They're powering up a planetary defense cannon. And it's aimed directly at the stellar envoy." Kaelen's blood turned to ice. The weight of the Council's collective gaze was heavy enough, but the knowledge that a planetary cannon was currently locked onto his ship and his crew made every step feel like walking through deep water. He looked at Elara, searching for a sign of betrayal, but her violet eyes were wide with a genuine flickering shock. She hadn't known. "Mira, can you jam the signal?" Kaelen whispered, barely moving his lips as he approached the center of the semicircular chamber. "Negative, Captain. Their encryption is based on harmonic resonance. It's like trying to hack a symphony with a hammer." Mira's voice was tense. "If that cannon fires, the stellar envoy will be vaporized in less than 3 milliseconds. I suggest you start talking, fast." The High Sovereign, Elara's father, sat upon a throne of obsidian that seemed to float in the center of the hall. His skin was a weathered, dark charcoal, and his eyes were not swirling nebulae but solid, piercing shards of white light. He didn't speak aloud. Instead, a wave of cold, rhythmic thought crashed into Kaelen's mind, making his vision blur for a second. "Human, you bring the stench of combustion and the vibration of discord into our sanctuary," the Sovereign projected. "Why should the great song of Lyra allow a single note of your chaotic species to persist?" Kaelen stood his ground. He felt the heat of the room rising, or perhaps it was just his own adrenaline. He looked up at the Sovereign, then glanced at Elara, who stood off to the side, her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles glowed a soft white. "Honored Sovereign," Kaelen began, his voice echoing in the vast, silent hall. "You call us chaotic. You call us a virus. But in our world, we have a saying, steel is forged in the hottest fires. We didn't choose the noise you hear. We grew up in a universe that tried to kill us at every turn. We didn't have a great song to guide us. We had to scream just to know we were still alive." A murmur, a literal ripple of light, ran through the Council elders. They weren't used to such bluntness. To them, diplomacy was a dance of frequencies. To Kaelen, it was a fight for survival. "You see our hunger as a threat," Kaelen continued, stepping closer to the floating throne. "But that hunger is what built the ships that brought us here. It's what drives us to protect those we care about. You want to blockade our system? You want to shut us out? All you'll do is turn that hunger into a desperate fire. And a fire in a vacuum consumes everything until nothing is left." The Sovereign's white light eyes narrowed. "A threat, Captain? You stand in the heart of our power, while our cannons are primed to erase your existence. You have no leverage. You have only words." "I have more than words," Kaelen snapped. He turned to Elara, his heart racing. "I have the truth. Princess Elara felt it the moment I stepped off that ship. She called it a sun inside my chest. It's not a weapon, Sovereign. It's passion. It's the one thing your perfect world is missing." Elara stepped forward, her movement breaking the rigid protocol of the Council. "Father," she projected, her voice shimmering with a desperate melody. "The human is right. Their frequency is jagged, yes, but it contains a depth of resonance we lost eons ago. If we silence them, we silence the only mirror that shows us what we truly are." The Sovereign stood, his presence expanding until the entire room felt like it was under a mountain of pressure. "Enough. The discord is already spreading. The planetary defense system has detected the instability of your arrival. It is programmed to purge the source of the dissonance. It's not the ship." Kaelen shouted, realizing the terrifying truth. "The cannon isn't aiming at the stellar envoy because of a glitch. It's aiming at me. I'm the source of the dissonance." Mira's voice screamed in his ear. "Captain, the cannon is at 90% power. The energy signature is spiking. If you don't leave the chamber now, the feedback loop will level this entire tower. Kaelen looked at Elara. She wasn't moving. She was staring at him, her gold and violet eyes filled with a terrifying realization. If he stayed, he died. If he ran, the peace died with him. Elara, Kaelen whispered, the name feeling like a prayer. Tell them to stop. Tell them I'm not the enemy. The princess reached out, her fingers finally brushing his skin. The contact felt like a lightning strike. A surge of raw, unfiltered human emotion flooded into her Kaelen's memories of Earth. The smell of rain, the ache of loneliness, and the sudden, impossible spark he felt for her. The sovereign raised his hand to give the final command. The air began to hum with the sound of impending annihilation. The air in the council chamber didn't just vibrate. It began to scream. A high-pitched, harmonic whine signaled that the planetary cannon was seconds away from discharging a beam of pure resonance. On the monitors, the stellar envoy was already beginning to bleed atmosphere as the pre-fire static tore at its shields. Kaelen felt the hair on his arms stand up. He looked at Elara, and for the first time, he saw a crack in the goddess-like composure of the Valerians. She looked terrified. "Sovereign, stop this!" Kaelen yelled over the rising hum. "You're not just killing a diplomat. You're starting a war that will echo for centuries." The sovereign's white light eyes remained cold, fixed on the data streams floating before him. "The system is autonomous, human. It reacts to dissonance. Your very existence here is a localized earthquake in our reality. To save the song, the static must be erased." "I'm not static," Kaelen roared, stepping toward the throne despite the crushing pressure. "I'm a soul. My people have a right to be heard, even if we don't sing in your key." In that moment of pure defiance, something shifted. Elara didn't just stand by. She lunged forward, grabbing Kaelen's hand. The physical contact was like a short circuit. Because Valerians communicated through frequency, the raw, jagged intensity of Kaelen's adrenaline-fueled emotions hit her like a tidal wave. She gasped, her indigo skin flashing a brilliant, blinding silver. "Father, stop!" Elara's mental projection wasn't a melody anymore. It was a command that shook the translucent pillars of the hall. He is not a discord. He is a melody we've forgotten how to hear. The sovereign paused, his hand hovering over the kill switch of the automated system. "Elara, move away. The feedback will consume you both." "No," she whispered, her voice now audible to Kaelen's ears, not just his mind. It was a soft, haunting sound, like wind through crystal chimes. She turned to Kaelen, her nebulae eyes swirling with a frantic, beautiful chaos. "Show them, Kaelen. Don't think of the treaty. Don't think of the war. Show them." The sun. Kaelen didn't understand at first. But then he looked into her eyes and realized what she was doing. She was acting as a conductor. She was opening a bridge between his messy, turbulent human heart and the rigid, cold network of the Valerian Council. He closed his eyes. He didn't think about physics or politics. He thought about the smell of a pine forest after a storm. He thought about the sound of a crowded city street at midnight. He thought about the ache of missing a home he might never see again, and the sudden, terrifying realization that he didn't want to leave this woman's side. He poured every ounce of his humanity into the grip of her hand. The council chamber erupted, not in fire, but in color. A wave of deep crimson, vibrant orange, and earthy brown colors the Valerians rarely experienced in their sterile light shot out from the point where their hands met. The elders fell back, shielding their eyes. The humming of the cannon stuttered. The frequency was changing. It wasn't being jammed, it was being harmonized. "Captain, the energy spike is receding," Mira shouted in his ear. "The cannon is. It's powering down. It thinks you're part of the planet's own resonance now. How is that possible?" Kaelen opened his eyes, gasping for air. The red and orange hues were fading, leaving a warm, golden glow between him and Elara. Her hand was still in his, her fingers interlaced with his own. She looked exhausted, her shimmering skin dimmed, but she was smiling, a small hesitant curve of the lips that felt more human than alien. The sovereign descended from his floating throne, his feet hitting the crystalline floor with a heavy thud. He approached them slowly, his white light eyes scanning the lingering gold light. "You have altered the great song," the sovereign projected, his tone no longer cold, but deeply unsettled. "You have introduced a passion that cannot be unheard." "This was not a negotiation, Captain Vance. This was a contagion. It's called empathy," Kaelen panted, refusing to let go of Elara's hand. "And it's the only thing that's going to keep us from killing each other." The sovereign looked at his daughter, then at the human captain. "The blockade is suspended. For now, but you have created a new problem. My daughter's frequency has been permanently shifted. She can no longer lead our people in the old ways. You have broken the Princess of Elara." Kaelen felt a pang of guilt, but Elara's grip tightened. "I am not broken, father," she said aloud, her voice stronger now. "I am finally awake." But the victory was short-lived. A sudden violent tremor shook the entire spire. The lights flickered and turned a deep, warning red. "Captain," Mira's voice was frantic. "That wasn't the cannon. A Valerian extremist fleet just jumped into the sector. They're firing on the Council spire. They say the princess has been defiled by human contact. And they're coming to finish what the cannon started." The floor buckled as a kinetic slug slammed into the spire's upper atmosphere stabilizers. The melodic hum of the city was instantly replaced by the shrill, rhythmic pulse of a planetary emergency. Real, gritty dust from the silicate walls rained down on Kaelen's dress uniform. The perfect world was cracking. "Mira, status!" Kaelen shouted, pulling Elara behind the shadow of a crystalline pillar as a second impact rocked the chamber. "A splinter faction of the Valerian High Guard, Captain. They're calling themselves the Purifiers of the Song. They've seized the orbital defense platforms. They're not just targeting the ship anymore. They're targeting the Council for allowing the human contagion to spread." Kaelen looked at the sovereign. The old ruler stood paralyzed, his white light eyes flickering like a dying bulb. For a race that lived in a world of perfect harmony, the sudden, violent discord of civil war was a sensory overload they weren't evolved to handle. The Council elders were huddled in corners, their skin turning a dull, sickly gray. "Sovereign! Snap out of it!" Kaelen yelled, grabbing the ruler by his ceremonial robes. "Your people are dying. Give me control of the Stellar Envoy's tactical link. We can provide cover while you evacuate the spire." The sovereign looked at Kaelen, his mental projection weak and garbled. The song, it is broken. We cannot fight ourselves." "Then let me do it," Kaelen snapped. He turned to Elara. Her indigo skin was pulsing a frantic rhythmic violet. She wasn't just scared. She was feeling the pain of every Valerian in the city through their shared resonance. "Kaelen," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They believe I am corrupted. They want to erase the frequency I've become. If I stay, they will level this entire district just to reach me." "You're not staying," Kaelen said, his voice dropping into the low, hard tone of a combat commander. "Mira, prep the emergency shuttle. Tell the envoy to burn every ounce of fuel they have to put themselves between the spire and the orbital platforms. Use the human noise broadcast every radio signal, every chaotic bit of data we have. Overload their sensors with our discord." "On it, Captain." "Initiating the heavy metal protocol," Mira chirped. Kaelen grabbed Elara's hand, his fingers locking firmly with hers. "We have to run, now." They sprinted through the collapsing corridors. The beautiful amber lights were now flashing a violent strobe-like red. Behind them, the sounds of obsidian-clad purifiers echoed, their boots rhythmic, their weapons humming with lethal intent. They weren't using words. They were communicating through a shared, murderous frequency that felt like needles in Kaelen's brain. They reached the private hangar just as a blast tore through the ceiling, showering them in glass shards. A squad of 6 purifiers blocked the path to the shuttle, their obsidian spears leveled at Kaelen's chest. "Move," Kaelen warned. reaching for the sidearm he'd been forced to leave at the entrance. He realized with a jolt that he was unarmed. The lead purifier didn't speak. He stepped forward, the tip of his spear glowing with enough energy to disintegrate a tank. But before he could fire, Elara stepped in front of Kaelen. She didn't raise a weapon. She raised her voice. She let out a cry, not a melodic note, but a raw, human-like scream of defiance that Kaelen had inadvertently taught her. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated emotion. The purifiers recoiled, their own internal frequencies shattered by the sheer, jagged power of her voice. They clutched their heads, their armor dimming as they collapsed to their knees. "Go!" she gasped, her skin flashing a brilliant, exhausted white. They scrambled into the shuttle. As the engines roared to life, Kaelen looked out the viewport. The stellar envoy was drifting into view, its shields flaring as it took hit after hit from the orbital platforms. It looked like a lone knight standing against a storm. "Mira, get us out of the atmosphere. Set a course for the Kuiper Belt. We need to hide until we can figure out how to stop this," Kaelen commanded. "Captain." Mir's voice was uncharacteristically soft. "There's a problem. The purifiers have locked the planetary gate. Unless someone stays behind to manually override the signal from the spire's core, no one leaves. Not us. Not the envoy." Kaelen looked at the control panel, then at Elara. She was staring at the burning city below, tears of iridescent liquid rolling down her cheeks. "I have to go back," she whispered. "No," Kaelen said, his heart hammering against his ribs. "If you go back, they'll kill you. If I don't," she replied, looking him in the eyes with a depth of love and sorrow that felt centuries old. "They'll kill everyone you've ever known to get to me." My answer was yes, Kaelen, to the peace. To the change. To... A massive explosion rocked the shuttle, throwing them against the bulkheads. The Purifier's flagship was closing in, its main battery glowing with the light of a dying star. The shuttle's deck plates groaned under the gravitational shear of the flagship's tractor beam. Kaelen watched the sensor display as the stellar envoy struggled to maintain its position, its hull glowing dull red from the friction of the upper atmosphere. He looked at Elara, whose hand was still trembling in his. The yes she had just whispered hung in the air, a fragile bridge between two worlds that were currently trying to tear each other apart. "You're not going back alone," Kaelen said, his voice a low growl of determination. "Mira, how long until that flagship achieves a full lock?" 90 seconds, Captain. And I should mention, the purifiers aren't just sending a boarding party. They've begun a resonance purge. They're broadcasting a signal designed to shatter the nervous systems of anyone not aligned with their purity. It's a literal death song. Kaelen felt a sharp, piercing thrum begin at the base of his skull. It felt like a drill made of ice. Elara gasped, clutching her temples, her indigo skin fading to a sickly, translucent gray. The purifiers were trying to cleanse her by deleting her consciousness. I can't think," Elara choked out. "The song. It's turning to glass. Kaelen, it hurts." Kaelen lunged for the communications console. He didn't have a weapon, but he had something the Valerians couldn't comprehend, the sheer, uncurated chaos of human history. "Mira, patch into the Purifier's broadcast frequency. Everything they're sending out, I want you to bounce it back, but I want you to run it through the Stellar Envoy's cultural archive first." "What exactly am I looking for, Captain?" Mira asked. "Give them the blues. Give them rock and roll. Give them the sounds of a crowded subway, a crying baby, and a stadium full of people cheering. Give them the noise of life." Kaelen grabbed the emergency headset. As the Purifier's death song reached a deafening crescendo, Mira hit the override. Suddenly, the cold, crystalline vibration of the Purifiers was met with the raw, distorted wail of an electric guitar and the rhythmic thumping of a heavy bass line. To a human, it was a classic anthem. To the Valerians, who lived in a world of perfect mathematical intervals, it was like a physical blow. On the viewport, the Purifier flagship actually shuddered. The beams of light coming from its weapons began to waver and flicker. The death song was being drowned out by the sound of humanity refusing to be quiet. It's working. Kaelen yelled over the cacophony. He turned to Elara. The gray tint was leaving her skin. She looked up, her eyes wide as she listened to the noise. It's so heavy, she whispered, a look of awe replacing her pain. It's not a song. It's a heartbeat. That's Earth, Elara, Kaelen said, pulling her toward the pilot's seat. It's messy, it's loud, and it's beautiful. And right now, it's our only chance. But the purifiers were adapting. The flagship's weapons stabilized as they began to filter out the human frequencies. A massive obsidian boarding craft launched from their hangar, slamming into the side of Kaelen's shuttle with enough force to breach the outer hull. The hiss of escaping oxygen filled the cabin. "Hull breach in Section 2, Mira screamed. "Internal gravity failing. Captain, we have company." The door to the cockpit didn't just open. It was disintegrated. 3 purifiers stepped in, their armor dripping with the blue-white energy of their resonance blades. They didn't look like diplomats or even soldiers. They looked like religious fanatics, their eyes glowing with a flat, terrifying light. The leader raised his blade, pointing it at Kaelen's throat. The human is the source. The purifier's thought projection was cold and sharp. Erase the source, and the princess returns to the song. Kaelen stood in front of Elara, his hands empty but his gaze steady. "You want to talk about the song? You've been singing the same note for 10,000 years. Don't you think it's time for a change of pace?" The purifier lunged. Kaelen moved not with the grace of a Valerian, but with the desperate, jagged speed of a man who had spent his life surviving. He dodged the blade, feeling the heat of the energy singe his collar, and slammed his fist into the purifier's chest plate. It was like hitting a wall of stone, but the impact sent a vibration through the purifier's armor that disrupted his internal frequency. The alien stumbled, his armor flickering. "Kaelen, look out!" Elara screamed. The second purifier raised his spear, the tip glowing with a lethal charge. But as he prepared to fire, the shuttle took another hit from the flagship. The floor tilted 90 degrees, sending everyone sliding across the deck. Kaelen grabbed a loose heavy-duty cable, swinging himself toward the control panel. He had one shot. "Mira, detonate the shuttle's fuel cells. Give us a localized EMP. Captain, that will leave us dead in the water. Just do it." The world turned white. A massive pulse of electromagnetic energy rippled through the shuttle. The purifier's armor went dark, their life support systems failing as they collapsed into heaps of obsidian. The lights in the shuttle died, leaving them in the eerie, flickering glow of the burning planet below. Kaelen gasped for air in the dim light. He looked over at Elara. She was safe, but the shuttle was tumbling toward the atmosphere of Lyra Prime. "Mira, are you there?" Kaelen whispered. There was no answer. The AI was offline. They were alone, trapped in a falling tin can with 3 unconscious killers, and the flagship was still overhead, turning its massive cannons toward them for one final silent shot. Kaelen crawled toward Elara, reaching out for her hand in the dark. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I wish I could have given you more than a falling star." Elara gripped his hand, her skin glowing with a faint, defiant light. "You gave me a heartbeat, Kaelen. That is more than my people have had in an eternity." Just as the flagship's main cannon reached full charge, a massive shadow eclipsed the sun. It wasn't a Valerian ship. It was something blocky, metallic, and covered in the scars of 1,000 battles. The United Earth Federation heavy cruiser, the Indomitable, had arrived. And it wasn't alone. The Indomitable didn't just arrive. It tore through the fabric of space like a jagged blade through silk. Behind it, a dozen Earth Coalition frigates fanned out, their railguns already rotating toward the Valerian flagship. In the silent vacuum, the human ships looked like predatory sharks next to the graceful bird-like aesthetics of the purifiers. "Captain Vance, this is Admiral Holloway of the Indomitable." A gravelly human voice crackled over the emergency radio, thick with static but beautiful in its familiarity. We picked up a distress signal that sounded like a heavy metal concert. Figured that had to be you. Do you require assistance, or are you enjoying the view? Kaelen let out a breath he felt he'd been holding since he left Earth. Admiral, you're a sight for sore eyes. We've got a localized MP blackout and a cabin full of hostile purifiers. I need an immediate extraction and medical for the princess. Copy that. Initiating tractor lock. Hang tight, Captain. We're about to show these folks how humans handle a noise complaint. The Indomitable fired. Not resonance beams, not harmonic frequencies, just raw, kinetic slugs moving at a fraction of the speed of light. The Purifier flagship's elegant shields rippled and shattered under the primitive, brutal force. For all their advanced technology, the Valerians had never designed their ships to withstand 1,000 tons of tungsten moving at Mach 20. Inside the dark shuttle, Elara watched the monitors with wide, shimmering eyes. She saw the human fleet move with a frantic, coordinated aggression that was the polar opposite of the Valerian way. They fight like they are one body, she whispered, her voice reflecting the golden glow of the human thrusters. It's not a song. It's a storm. That's the UEF for you, Kaelen said, helping her stand as the tractor beam began to pull them toward the massive bay of the Indomitable. We're not very good at harmony, but we're incredible at looking out for our own. The shuttle groaned as it settled into the hangar bay. The airlock hissed open, and a squad of Earth Marines in heavy power armor swarmed in, their rifles leveled. When they saw Kaelen and the princess, the lead Marine raised a hand, signaling the clear. Kaelen stepped onto the metal deck of the cruiser, the smell of recycled air and machine oil hitting him like a wave of nostalgia. He was home. Well, as close to home as he could get in the middle of a war zone. Admiral Holloway met them at the dock, his face a map of scars and gray stubble. He looked at Elara, his eyes narrowing in a mix of awe and tactical appraisal. So this is the lady who caused all the fuss, Holloway said, his voice dropping to a more respectful tone. Princess, on behalf of Earth, I apologize for the, let's call it, energetic greeting. My boys are a bit jumpy. Elara bowed her head slightly, her indigo skin shimmering under the harsh fluorescent lights of the hangar. Admiral Holloway, your energy has saved my life. But the conflict is not over. My father is still in the spire, and the purifiers will not stop until the dissonance, until I am erased. Kaelen looked at the tactical map being projected in the center of the hangar. The Valerian Civil War was spreading. The purifier fleet was growing, and more orbital platforms were turning their sights on the capital city below. He's right, Kaelen said, looking at Holloway. If we leave now, Lyra Prime burns. We didn't come here to start a war, Admiral. We came to build a bridge. A bridge is hard to build when the other side is shooting at the construction crew, Vance, Holloway replied, crossing his arms. The Joint Chiefs gave me orders to extract you and get out. They're not looking to get involved in an alien religious war. It's not just a religious war, Kaelen argued, stepping closer. If the purifiers win, they'll purge any influence of discord. That means every human colony within 10 light years becomes a target. We help the Sovereign now, or we fight the purifiers on Earth's doorstep in 6 months. Your choice. Holloway chewed on the inside of his cheek, staring at the map. He looked at Elara, then back at Kaelen. You always were a pain in the neck, Vance. Fine. But if this goes south, it's your head on the platter. I'll take those odds, Kaelen said. He turned to Elara. We're going back down. We're going to find your father and end this. Elara reached out, her fingers brushing Kaelen's hand. In the middle of the crowded, noisy hangar, a sudden silence fell between them. A localized pocket of that same gold light they had shared in the council chamber. Kaelen, she whispered into his mind. My people believe that when two frequencies merge, the original notes are lost forever. They fear the change, but I find I don't miss the old song at all. Kaelen smiled, a genuine, tired smile. Good, because the next part is going to be very, very loud. Suddenly, the ship's alarms began to wail again. Admiral, a technician shouted from a nearby console. The purifiers have activated a resonance cascade in the planet's core. They're not just trying to kill the Council, they're going to shatter the entire planet. The deck of the Indomitable shuddered with a rhythmic, bone-deep vibration that felt like the pulse of a dying god. On the tactical screens, the shimmering surface of Lyra Prime was beginning to fracture. Veins of blinding white light were spreading across the continents, the resonance cascade. It wasn't an explosion. It was the planet's very molecular structure being vibrated into dust. "They're going to crack the world," Kaelen whispered, the horror sinking in. "They'd rather have a graveyard of perfect silence than a living world with us in it. Admiral, we have 12 minutes before the planetary crust reaches the breaking point." My RS voice crackled over the ship's speakers, having been uploaded into the Indomitable's mainframe. The purifiers have locked themselves into the core control spire. They're broadcasting a feedback loop that's accelerating the cascade. Admiral Holloway looked at the tactical readout, his jaw set in a grim line. "We can't hit that spire from orbit. Our railguns would just speed up the collapse. We need boots on the ground to shut that signal down manually." "I'm going," Kaelen said, already moving toward the armory. "Kaelen, wait," Elara called out, her voice echoing with a new, crystalline authority. She caught up to him, her indigo skin pulsing with a rhythmic light that matched the planet's tremors. "You cannot simply break the signal. It is a psychic lock. It requires a Valerian of royal blood to harmonize the core back to stability. You need me." Kaelen stopped, turning to face her. "Elara, the core is a furnace of resonance right now. If you step into that frequency, it could overwrite who you are. You might lose yourself in the song." Elara stepped closer, her nebulae eyes burning with a fierce human-like defiance. "Then remind me who I am, Kaelen. Keep your noise loud enough that I can find my way back." 10 minutes later, a specialized drop pod streaked through the burning atmosphere of Lyra Prime. Inside were Kaelen, Elara, and a squad of Earth's most elite orbital shock troopers. The sky outside was a bruised purple, torn apart by lightning that didn't strike the ground, but rose from it. The pod slammed into the plaza of the core control spire, the doors blowing outward before the dust had even settled. Kaelen was out first, his pulse rifle raised. The plaza was a war zone. The Sovereign's loyalist guards were engaged in a desperate, hand-to-hand struggle with the purifiers. It was a battle of light against shadow, melody against silence. "Clear a path," Kaelen roared over the comms. The Marines moved with surgical precision, their lead-based ammunition tearing through the purifiers' energy shields. The Valerians were used to fighting with frequencies. They weren't prepared for the blunt, kinetic violence of a human firefight. Kaelen and Elara reached the center of the spire, a massive chamber where a pillar of pure, liquid light rose from the planet's depths. Standing before it was the High Purifier, his armor glowing with a terrifying, jagged white light. He wasn't even fighting. He was chanting, his mental projection a scream of pure nihilism. The song must be pure. The Purifier projected, his voice a spike in Kaelen's brain. "Better the silence of the void than the infection of the flesh. The only thing infected here is your mind." Kaelen shouted, firing a burst of suppressive rounds. The Purifier waved a hand, a wave of sonic force throwing Kaelen across the room. His rifle clattered away, his vision swimming in red. He watched, helpless, as the Purifier turned his gaze toward Elara. "Traitor Princess," the Purifier hissed. "Die with your discord." He raised his obsidian spear, the tip white-hot with the energy of the planet's core. But Elara didn't flinch. She didn't raise a weapon. She walked toward the pillar of light, her indigo skin beginning to glow with a soft golden radiance, the same warmth Kaelen had shared with her. "I am not a traitor," she said aloud, her voice ringing out over the roar of the cascade. "I am the evolution of the song." She stepped into the stream of light. The room exploded in a kaleidoscope of color. The white light of the purifiers was met with a flood of human emotion, Kaelen's memories, the Admiral's grit, the messy, beautiful chaos of a billion human lives. Elara was acting as the bridge, funneling the noise of humanity into the very heart of the planet. The high purifier screamed, his armor shattering as the impure frequency hit him. He was literally undone by the complexity of the emotion. He dissolved into a cloud of silent dust. But the light was consuming Elara. Her form was becoming translucent, her eyes turning into blinding stars. Elara! Kaelen scrambled toward the light, the heat blistering his skin. Come back. The planet is stabilizing. You've done it. Come back. But she couldn't hear him. She was merging with the core. The planet's tremors were fading, but the woman he loved was disappearing into the light. Mayra! Kaelen screamed. Give me a frequency. Give me something to pull her out. Captain, Myra's voice was strained. There's only one frequency strong enough to break a Valerian psychic merge. It's not a sound. It's a direct bioelectrical link. You have to go in and get her. Kaelen didn't hesitate. He dived into the liquid light. The moment Kaelen breached the pillar of light, his world dissolved. He wasn't in the core spire anymore. He was in a vast, infinite ocean of consciousness. Every thought, every dream, and every memory of the Valerian race was swirling around him like a tidal wave of silver glass. The pressure was immense. It felt like his very atoms were being pulled apart by 1,000 different symphonies. Elara! He shouted, but he had no voice. He was a flicker of heat in a world of ice-cold geometry. Then he saw her. She was at the center of the vortex, her form shimmering like a ghost. She was no longer indigo. She was a translucent white, her eyes closed, her essence being absorbed by the planet's ancient machine. The resonance cascade had stopped, but the core was demanding a price. It needed a conscious mind to regulate the new harmony, and it was taking hers. Leave me, Kaelen. Her voice echoed in his soul, sounding thin and distant. The planet is safe. The song is stable. But I must stay to hold the notes together. If I leave, the silence returns. To hell with the silence. Kaelen fought against the current of data, pushing himself forward with a sheer, stubborn human will that defied the laws of physics. I didn't come across the galaxy to watch you become a battery. We're humans, Elara. We don't accept the inevitable. We fight it. He reached out, his hand cutting through the silver light. His fingers brushed hers, and the impact was like a supernova. The cold perfection of the Valerian core was suddenly flooded with the raw, unrefined power of Kaelen's life. He didn't give her a song. He gave her the memory of a sun-drenched afternoon, the grit of sand between toes, the smell of wood smoke, and the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of falling in love. He anchored her to the physical world with the weight of his own humanity. The silver ocean turned gold. Your heat, Elara gasped, her eyes snapping open. It's too much. It's burning the core. Let it burn, Kaelen roared. Come home. With a violent, reality-bending wrench, Kaelen pulled. The golden light flared, blinding him, and for a second, the universe went silent. Kaelen hit the crystalline floor of the spire with a bone-jarring thud. The liquid pillar was gone, replaced by a soft, glowing mist that rained down like warm embers. He gasped for air, his lungs burning, his skin tingling with 1,000 static shocks. He looked down. Elara was lying across him, her skin a deep, vibrant violet, darker and richer than it had ever been. She was breathing. Not the rhythmic, mechanical breath of a Valerian, but the ragged, uneven gasp of someone who had just been born. Did we? She whispered, her voice cracking. We're here, Kaelen panted, clutching her to his chest. We're both here. Outside, the sky was beginning to clear. The violent purple lightning had vanished, replaced by the soft, iridescent dawn of Lyra Prime. The purifiers had been scattered, their leader gone, their ideology shattered by the very noise they tried to erase. But the silence in the room was broken by the sound of heavy boots. Kaelen looked up, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon he didn't have. The Sovereign stood at the entrance of the chamber. His obsidian robes were torn, and his white-light eyes were dim. Behind him stood Admiral Halloway and a contingent of Earth Marines. For a long moment, no one spoke. The two leaders, one representing an ancient dying order, the other representing a young chaotic future, looked at the human captain and the alien princess huddled on the floor. The sovereign approached them slowly. He looked at his daughter, noticing the change in her skin, the way she clung to the human. "The song has changed," the sovereign projected, but the coldness was gone. There was a profound, weary sadness in his thoughts. "You have introduced a resonance that can never be undone. My people, they are confused. They feel things they have no names for." "They'll learn," Kaelen said, helping Elara to her feet. "Names are easy. It's the feeling that matters." Admiral Holloway stepped forward, checking his watch. "The Purifier fleet is in full retreat. The UEF is holding the orbital lanes, but the Council is asking for a formal summit. They want to know what happens next." Kaelen looked at Elara. She looked back at him, a small knowing smile playing on her lips. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers interlacing with his in front of both their worlds. "What happens next," Elara said, her voice echoing with a new fused authority, "is that we stop talking about treaties. We start talking about a future where no one has to sing alone." But as the sun rose over the rebuilt towers of Alaris, a final transmission crackled over Kaelen's internal comms, a signal from the deep edges of the sector that even Mira hadn't detected. "Captain," Myra's voice was tense. "I'm picking up a massive signature at the edge of the system. It's not Valerian. And it's not human. It's a response to the noise we just made. Something very old has been woken up by the planet's scream." The air in the core spire thickened, not with the hum of Valerian technology, but with a primitive, crushing weight that made the lights flicker into a dull, bloody crimson. On the tactical HUD of the Marines, every sensor redlined simultaneously. A shadow began to pass over the capital city, not a ship, but a rift in space itself, as if the universe was peeling back its skin to reveal something ancient and hungry. "Mira, I need an ID now," Kaelen barked, pulling Elara close. "It's not in the database, Captain." Mira's voice was distorted by static. "But it's responding to the frequency you and Elara created. It's a consumer, a nomadic entity from the first void. They don't eat matter, they eat emotion. And you just rang the dinner bell for the entire galaxy." The Sovereign's eyes widened with a terror that surpassed any political fear. "The Silent Ones," he projected, his thoughts trembling. "The legends said they would return if the song ever lost its purity. We are not prepared for this." "We are," Kaelen said, looking at Admiral Holloway. The Admiral gave a sharp nod and tapped his comms. "All ships, this is Holloway. Form a defensive sphere around the planet. Target the rift. If it breathes, kill it." The sky erupted once more. The Indomitable and its frigates unleashed a wall of fire against the encroaching darkness. But the consumer wasn't a physical target. The railgun slugs passed through the rift like stones through smoke. The entity began to pulse, a low-frequency thrum that started to drain the color from the world. Kaelen felt a sudden, hollow ache in his chest, a coldness that tried to suck away every memory of joy or love he had. "It's feeding," Elara gasped, her skin dimming as the entity began to harvest the very passion that had saved her. "If it takes our light, the planet will truly die this time." Kaelen looked at the rift, then at the woman beside him. He realized that the only way to stop a void was to fill it until it burst. "Admiral, Sovereign, give me every broadcast channel you have." Kaelen shouted. "Don't fight it with weapons. Fight it with the one thing a void can't handle, the truth of who we are." Under Kaelen's direction, the human fleet and the Valerian towers didn't fire. Instead, they broadcast. They sent out everything. Not just the music, but the raw data of human and Valerian history. The wars, the weddings, the birth of children, the grief of loss, the triumph of the spirit. They poured 1 billion years of collective experience into the rift. The consumer shuddered. It was built to eat scraps of emotion, not a tidal wave of 1,000 civilizations worth of feeling. The rift began to glow, turning from a void black to a blinding, kaleidoscopic white. It couldn't contain the noise. It couldn't harmonize the chaos. With a sound like 1,000 glass stars shattering at once, the rift collapsed in on itself, retreating back into the dark corners of the universe, unable to stomach the sheer intensity of the human-Valerian bond. Silence finally fell over Lyra Prime, a true, peaceful silence. Days later, the stellar envoy sat in the repaired docks, its hull gleaming. Kaelen stood on the observation deck, looking out at the city where humans and Valerians were, for the first time, walking the streets together. "You're leaving," Elara said, stepping up behind him. She was no longer dressed in the stiff silks of a princess, but in a modified Earth pilot's jacket that looked surprisingly good on her. "I have to report back," Kaelen said, turning to her. "But the treaty is signed. The blockade is gone. We're allies now." "More than allies, I think," Elara whispered, stepping into his space. She looked at him with those nebulous eyes that now held a spark of very human mischief. "I told my father that if he wants me to lead, I must understand the noise better. I've requested an exchange program. I'm going to Earth, Kaelen." Kaelen laughed, a sound of pure, unadulterated relief. He took her hand and leaned in, whispering into the space between them. "I wish I could marry her," he murmured, a thought he had held onto since the moment they met. Elara smiled, her skin glowing with a warm golden light. She didn't need a telepathic bridge to hear him this time. "My answer is yes," she said. As they looked out at the stars for the first time in history, the galaxy didn't feel like a cold, empty void. It felt like home. If you enjoyed this journey through the stars and the power of the human spirit, make sure to hit that like button and share this story with your fellow explorers. Don't forget to subscribe to HFY Soundscape for more epic tales of humanity's place in the universe. What should our next adventure be? Let us know in the comments below.